I have a feeling that things will improve with Overwatch going forward. I don't know how I know this at all. I don't know how I know it. But I think things will start to improve to the point where I think they're starting to get an idea of what they should do. But I don't really know, like, you know, I don't really know what they're gonna, if they're going to do anything or what's going to be happening in general going forward. So we'll see. I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping maybe in a couple weeks or so we can start to like see where where their mindset is on things. Maybe even less than a couple weeks. So we'll see what happens. I'm not sure.
What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. Did Emongg just drop a bombshell? I think he did, because as Emongg goes to explain later in this stream, where he did this adorable wink at the camera, last year, prior to Roll Queue coming out, Emongg as well was doing these cheeky little teases towards upcoming changes to Overwatch. And then we got Locked 222. Emongg has proven to have an insider source before, and because of that, I'm putting full faith that there's something big around the corner. Now, there is a spectrum of things that I think Emongg could be referring to, and we'll try to break down what those could be. And the first thing that might come to your mind is the recent 132 post from Jeff Kaplan. And although Jeff did say they may trial that mode on the PTR for the public to get some test information on, I think that's a bit more of a mad scientist strategy rather than a serious direction that everyone has faith in, right? I mean, Jeff said as much, that it has big trade-offs and benefits. The team isn't really agreed, and I know the player base definitely isn't either. So I don't see that as like a first step that's tangible in any way for the foreseeable future. Emongg says as well on his stream, and you might say, well, of course Emongg would deny if the exact thing he knows is coming gets referenced in chat, but he also could just ignore that chat comment. But instead, he dispels that rumor in saying that he doesn't think 3-2-1 is seriously going to be a thing, and I tend to agree with him. Instead, I think Jeff Kaplan may have deployed a bit of a sales technique. If you don't know, when you offer something outrageous to a customer that's either overpriced or too big of a commitment or whatever, a more reasonable purchase seems more approachable, right? They typically have a knee-jerk reaction to, no, that's too much for me, way too far, not interested. But what that does, for whatever reasons, like a psychological phenomenon, it helps aid that customer to a more reasonable middle ground to pull the trigger on accepting something that maybe they didn't even want to buy anyway, right? But you sort of shoot for the moon and then negotiate into still buying a thing anyway, rather than the binary between not buying and buying, right? I'm sure this has some term for it, but it's a pretty well-known thing, and maybe Jeff isn't explicitly trying to do this, but I think floating the 3-2-1 option as sort of a mad scientist idea may soften the landing of a more reasonable middle ground that's controversial, but not as controversial as 3-2-1 would be. Maybe not. Maybe I'm crazy. More on that idea. Just keep that in your minds. Let's move on to some other ideas that I think are too low impact for Emongg to get excited for. So, for example, I don't think Overwatch 2 is going to be announced anytime soon. I think it's too soon. Maybe we get some news about it, but even if we did, that wouldn't really help Overwatch now. Keep in mind as well, Emongg is a high-level competitive player, so I don't even think the PvE stuff with the sequel would even necessarily get him too excited. Granted, this conversation on his stream was sparked up with Overwatch 2 kind of being a discussion point, but instead I actually think he's more talking about fixes to the Overwatch PvP game we know today, what most dedicated hardcore fans want the developers to put focus on. Okay, with that being said, could it be then a new hero? We're expecting about one hero for the year until Overwatch 2 comes out. It's got to come out sometime, but here's the thing. Maybe that does come, but because Emongg contextualizes this to be comparable to when he was teasing he knew stuff about Roll Queue, I think if he knew about a new hero, unless it like made some magical meta that everyone loved, there's no way that a new hero would have that kind of impact either. So as much as we all would be excited to get one, or any new content for that matter, I don't think he's talking about new content at all. Another idea that I don't think it is, balance changes. Because we've already seen pretty decent balance changes, and Emongg's wording to me implies more of a feature, sort of on Blizzard's classic crawl, walk, run approach to rolling out features in the game. Because really, even if we did get improvements to the balance, it doesn't ever really do that much. I'm sad to say, everyone's really excited about balance. I'm excited as well, but I think if the years of data of Overwatch being in many different states has taught us anything, is that at best, balance can only, let's say, make either tier 2 or off meta strategies a bit more approachable and less bad, but never will we be in a world that saw heroes see widespread viability without there being a more or less dominant meta. That's not really a thing. And I know when I start gearing the conversation towards these kinds of things, a lot of people's eyes glaze over and it gets kind of boring, because for the average level of play, your execution on any strategy has a bigger impact than the strategy you choose. So for example, if you're just good at Ashe, it doesn't matter if Hanzo's meta, because if you perform better at Ashe than Hanzo at an average level of play, you're just going to get more value, right? Where it starts to matter is when the margins become smaller and smaller as you go up and up the skill tiers, where it becomes less and less viable to try things outside of the meta comp. And even when the balance is really good, second tier strategies, I think at best can only get about 10 to 25% viability. And honestly, that's probably a super high estimate as well. It might be closer to like 5 to 10 or something, but regardless, those are the kind of numbers we're playing with, right? Where if you look at the past 3 years of Overwatch, there's always been a dominant meta comp, and best case scenario, there is like 1.5-ish off meta comps that can kind of compete or do something specific on specific maps and in specific contexts. That's about it. That's all we get. That's a feature of the way the game works with ult economy. You get punished for hero swapping, the way the objectives are scored because they're time based. Again, this is more of a high level thing. Doesn't matter as much for the average player, but the higher up you go, the more swapping off a comp and losing your ultimate progress is akin to like saying, well, can we just replay the map and say we lose because we're basically done. Okay, I've mentioned a bunch of things that I don't think it is, and I'm almost too excited to hint at what I think it might be. It's too good to be true. There's no way this is true. You see, the thing is, there's other things in Overwatch that I've talked about for quite some time that I've wanted forever, like 222 Rollock. If you remember, before it came out many months, just based on looking at the wording of what Jeff has said in interviews and how interested he was in it, we flat out said that it was going to be coming to Overwatch. A lot of people called us crazy at the time. No, it'll never work. It'll ruin the game. And I know a lot of players aren't super satisfied with roll queue. Like, it hasn't solved every problem, but I think if you just play in the arcade for a bit, like CTF right now, where there is no roll queue, you'll remember real quick how unplayable the game can be when your 5 other randoms pick DPS, or you have some terrible comp and the enemy's running goats. It's just horrible, okay? It's just really bad. 222 lock saved quick play for sure, made quick play awesome to play. I love playing it now, but it didn't really do enough for the competitive side of the game, which, by the way, I think is the only thing I would assume Emongg would talk about. He's a high-level streamer. He's not talking about things that are going to help casual players. I don't think. It would have to be for the competitive community. And if you haven't put it in the comment section already, what do you think that guess would be? What would be the one thing that would see immediate change to how the game of Overwatch is played in a positive direction? We talked about 222 for over a year. What else have we talked about for about a year's time? What's the one thing that would guarantee compositional diversity? I don't want to set myself up to get too excited about this, but it's already done. I can't think of anything else that it could be. I think the competitive mode of Overwatch is going to be getting a single ban. That's right, because think of the timing of it. Emongg said it's going to be in a week or a few, hinting more towards the close range. And what's coming up in a few weeks? Overwatch League. It's 2.5 weeks away. Not only did they use last season to institute a major feature into Overwatch with 222 Rollock, if you remember back to the leaks way back when, technically unconfirmed leaks, but ones that I think are completely true, floated the idea of putting Rollock into the Overwatch League before the game. They weren't sure if they wanted to do that or not because it wasn't ready for the game. They ended up waiting and kind of ruining the season in a way because they wanted them both to be synced up. You had a completely different format for half the season and the pros had to learn Rollock and it was just a big mess. Not only do I think it's plausible that because of how important the Overwatch League is to Blizzard, that they're going to institute another big change to the basic game format, They may even do it before it's ready to go into the game this time because they don't have time to waste, right? Season 3 has been described internally at Blizzard. This is a rumor, but safe to say so many people have said it, that the league is considering it to be a, quote, make or break season. And one of the biggest criticisms has been seeing mirror matches nonstop. This is a no-brainer to anybody in the competitive community. Seeing the same comp mirrored constantly is for a long list of reasons, and the only way that you're really going to stop that is hero bans. And I'm paraphrasing a bit, but Emongg essentially said in those clips that we're going to see where Blizzard wants to go. I think it's just going to be an OWL for now, which isn't going to be offensive to anybody, really, right? Like, if OWL's playing a slightly different game to us for a while, does anybody care? I honestly think no. It's a bigger problem when you talk about putting it into the competitive game, but it feels like a necessity to most people in OWL. Because think about it, who does it hurt if it's just for pro players? Nobody. And although they might technically be playing a different game to you, the difference between ranked mode and pro play was already so different anyway. I think adding bans to at least OWL does a better job of getting the game to replicate what ranked looks like for the average player. Why? I've explained this before, but in fast forward, because in your average ranked game, not everybody has mastered all of the top heroes, and you just see a natural distribution of different play styles get used, whether they're good or not, whether they're meta or not. People just play heroes they like, and that's fine, right? That's perfectly reasonable. But that's not how the pros get to play the game, unless there was restrictions to try to cut off strategies and get deeper into the tech tree of compositions you can go into. And I think bans is the answer. Now, of course, I think bans are the answer, but does Blizzard think bans are the answer? They've basically said no forever, right? There's been no clue that they were going to be doing it, but here's the thing. Blizzard always comes around to these ideas that the community hammer on about forever. When you got guys like Siegel, who I 100% know Blizzard respects, giving feedback publicly about Overwatch, and I assume privately as well, Blizzard for sure have heard the arguments. I mean, Jake's on the broadcasting team. He advocates for this as well. All signs are pointing to this, because what else could it be that Emongg would get excited about? I think this is the only thing it could be. I think they'll have a simplified system for the Overwatch League, and we'll get a developer update explaining the path they want to go. We're going to get a similar explanation from Jeff, just like we did with 222, where he said limitations allows you to be more creative, because without bans, the strongest strategies always get used, whereas with bans, you're allowed to use what would have been weaker strategies once you start to ban out some of the strongest stuff. And calling back to earlier in the video, the 1-3-2 experiment from Jeff indicates that Blizzard is looking to make radical changes to the base format of Overwatch. If they're testing that option, they wouldn't be doing their due diligence if they weren't testing bans. We would have to think that they're bad at developing, which I don't think. I think they make some mistakes and are too slow and blah, 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 but they're not bad developers, right? The 1-3-2 lock is an awesome type of developer idea, but if they're trying that level of severe change to the game, don't you think they're trying others? 1-3-2 was to attack the problem of queue times, but stale metas is a problem as well, and that's what hero bans are for. Now, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I love this idea too much that I'm drawing connections that aren't there, but I don't think so. And if you do think I'm wrong, go ahead. Let me know in the comment section, what the heck is Emongg talking about? Because I don't think anything else could have a similar level of impact on the game with like one update. If Blizzard acknowledges that they're considering one, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they have heard the overwhelming support from the competitive community for hero bans. And the consensus generally is one would be enough. Blizzard loves taking small first steps on these types of things. Just one ban per map, and there's all sorts of rule sets that you can do. Lots of big brains in the Overwatch community have explained how this could work for every context, but in the pro scene, if each team banned one hero per map in a 3-map series and couldn't ban the same hero twice, automatically you just see different strats every map. There's more extreme versions where maybe you ban one hero each map and they carry over map to map, bit more extreme, but there's lots of ways where it would guarantee we don't get the same comp every map all the time. How that gets implemented into ranked, and if it should at all, is a controversial point. I agree with that. Again, I don't think it's necessary for the average player. Maybe it's something that's unlocked in GM. Who knows? That's where it's kind of needed, in my opinion, and it isn't really necessary below that. So if the team thought it was too slow and clunky for the average player, maybe it's just a high-level thing. Now, it's gonna be difficult to come down from that level of emotion, but just a few other news stories for you before we close out the video. Overwatch community manager Molly hops onto the forums to tell us that there was a change to how the kill cam operates on the recent patch that has the camera snap towards the target that killed you rather than sort of of looking over your dead body. And this quick camera movement has reported to give some players motion sickness, and they're looking to roll out a toggle option to disable this feature if that affects you. Update on the Australian bushfire situation. Kyla Glover, who works at Blizzard, explains that no charity skins are planned, but Blizzard did match employee donations to the cause so that they are giving to the Australian bushfires, but making the skins just wouldn't work in the current dev cycle. However, Modern Warfare is getting a charity skin, so if you do own that game, you can purchase the Outback Relief Pack in Modern Warfare, where 100% of the profits go to charity to help fight against the bushfires. That's it for today's video, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's gonna be a lot of fun to read your comments today, so let me know your thoughts on everything we discussed here today. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. See you guys next time.